Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at your expansion Seattle Kraken as we continue our lineup prediction series. We're heading out west, out in the Pacific Division at the Seattle Kraken. So let's get right into it. So the inaugural season of the Seattle Kraken puts together a pretty interesting roster. And I think there is some optimism, at the very least, in Seattle about what we could see from this team this year. So, looking at your forward group, you've got Jaden Schwartz, Yanni Gourde, and Jordan Eberle as your top line. Jordan Eberle did spend a lot of time in the top six with the New York Islanders, a team that has gone to the Eastern Conference Final and almost knocked off Tampa the past two seasons. So, he's been on a pretty good roster. Yanni Gourde has been on that Tampa Bay Lightning team that has won back-to-back Stanley Cups. The question is, what can he do as a top-line forward? He was playing middle 6 minutes with the Tampa Bay Lightning with some really talented players around him. Guys like Braden Point and Steven Stamkos and Alex Killorn, and we could go on and on. He's not going to have that necessarily in Seattle, and I think it's going to be a different look. And you've also got Jaden Schwartz. Now, this is the most intriguing guy because he may be the slam dunk best signing of free agency this summer, or he can end up being the biggest bust because of his injuries. That's a big reason the St. Louis Blues let him go in free agency. He has been kind of a liability. He was going to ask for a lot of money, and he got a lot of term, and he's kind of a reliability in terms of his availability on the ice. So this is a very interesting, it's either going to be a home run hit or a complete strikeout in one pitch. It could be that sort of situation, but I think the Seattle Kraken, with the amount of cap space they have, were willing to take the chance on that. So there you go. There's your top line. So again, I don't love it. I don't necessarily hate it either, though. It's definitely one of the better top lines that we've seen. Now looking at the second line, or at the very least for an expansion team, remember that too. Second line, you got Mason Appleton, Jared Mccann, and Jonas Donskoi. Now, again, on each of their respective teams, these were bottom six guys. Now, maybe Jared Mccann played a little bit of top six in Toronto, but other than that, this was before he went to Toronto, Pittsburgh, thank you. He did play in the top six in Pittsburgh. So, but again, he was playing with Malkin, Crosby, Gensel, Rust. He was playing with different guys than Mason Appleton and Jonas Donskoi. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does this year compared to last season. He had a really good season, though, which does show some optimism. So he does have that momentum going into this year, unlike guys maybe like a Jaden Schwartz or a Jonas Donskoi. Now, speaking of Donskoi, again, there's some promise there from him as well. But again, there's a lot of questions because he's been a bottom six guy in Colorado, a very stacked forward group in Colorado. He was kind of just another piece there. So it's going to be a different environment here in Seattle. And Mason Appleton, the talk has always been, if you give Mason Appleton more minutes, he'll be a better player. So we're going to really get an idea of where he stands as an NHL player this season, getting more ice time. Now looking at your bottom six, I do have to say they do have some grit on this team. You got Kalle Järnkrok, Brandon Tanev, and Alexander Wennberg. I think some people really don't like that signing of Wennberg this offseason. They gave him a lot of money, and he may end up being the second-line guy over Jared Mccann. But I think they're going to put Mccann ahead of Wennberg, which I think some people may make an argument to that. But I really like Wennberg. He's a better third-line guy. And I think we saw in his time in Florida that was just where he fit the best. So that is my expectations there. Järnkrok and Tanev, good penalty-killing guys that can put up points in the playoffs if they get there. They're good playoff guys. But we'll have to wait and see down the road how far they really go. But those are some guys that's going to be a difficult line to play against. So that is something to look at. Your fourth line, you got Marcus Johansson, Colin Blackwell, and Nathan Bastian. So a couple of guys from the Metropolitan Division there, or at least have played there. Johansen in his time in Washington. Again, a difficult line to play against. Now, you could make the argument that this fourth line probably isn't on most NHL teams around the league. But we saw Colin Blackwell was a pretty good player, actually playing in the top six last season with the Rangers. Nathan Bastian got some time in the middle six with the Devils, but again, a team that was lacking wingers, he did move up the lineup So maybe there was a little bit more from that. And Marcus Johansen has had some injury issues, kind of like Jaden Schwartz. So they're kind of taking a chance on him, but they loaded up on the depth. And I think that's really what the Kraken were looking to do. They don't necessarily have the star talent, that number one guy, but they have a lot of guys that could jump into the lineup if they need to, or guys that kind of are utility knives that could jump throughout the lineup. Bastian can play on the first line. He can play on the fourth line, kind of thing. Looking at some of the guys I have on the scratch pad or potential depth, you got guys like Riley Sheahan and Ryan Donato, who I think are definitely going to make an argument to this lineup. But again, they had down seasons last year. So Riley Sheahan, who like Luke Goaltending, has been with the Red Wings for a long time. Yzerman let them go this year. So definitely going to see a different look there. And you also have guys like Morgan Geekie, who I really like. I think another season of him with the Charlotte Checkers in the AHL is the best thing. I think one more season of him there and allow him to develop his game. And I just don't see a spot for him in the top 6 right now. And I don't think he should be a bottom 6 center. I just don't think that's the best spot for him. Let him dominate in the AHL, grind it out one more season, and come the trade deadline, maybe you move out one or two of those centers and he could jump into the lineup then. And just don't force the issue on him right away. You also have a guy like Carson Soucy, who took, the media kind of took a complete hit at why did you take Soucy over Voracek, Van Riemsdyk? There were some bigger names there in Philly, and they decided to go with Soucy. So we're going to get an idea of what he's all about as well. Looking at your defense, their defense is pretty solid. Again, this is a Ron Francis defense. A big-bodied, defensive-minded defense. He did this with the Hurricanes in their expansion back in the 90s. So you're looking at Mark Giordano and Jamie Oleksiak as your top pair. I know, that's not a fun pair to play against. Oleksiak, one of the biggest defensemen in the NHL. And Mark Giordano actually looks like a small defenseman on this team, coming in at 6'1 or 6'2 because of how big these guys are. So a pretty good defense there. Veterans there. They've played the game. They've got the experience. I do like that first pair. Now, the second pairing is pretty solid as well. You got Vince Dunn and Adam Larson. I think Vince Dunn and Larson could potentially be the top pair to this team as the season goes along. As guys like Giordano or Oleksiak either get injured or traded or move down the depth chart, I think Dunn and Larson will move their way up. But to start the season, I'd like to see Dunn solidify himself on that second pair and move forward from there. Now, the third pairing is very interesting. I really like this pairing. This is where the depth of the Kraken's defense comes into effect. You got Carson Soucy and Cale Fleury. I think this is pretty good. I like Carson Soucy. Yes, his salary cap is a little bit high for a third pairing defenseman, but you have to invest in defense. And I think that Ron Francis put that at a premium this summer at the expansion draft and throughout free agency. So I think Carson Soucy coming in is a great add and a guy that could potentially become a top 4 D-man. He wasn't going to really get that opportunity in Minnesota. Maybe on that second pair, but they've got a lot of guys already there. Guys like Brodin, Dumba, Spurgeon. He really wasn't going to get that opportunity. He probably will get that in Seattle. And Cale Fleury, a guy that spent some time in Montreal. He found some time, where else? I think it was in Ottawa. So it's going to be good to see him get another opportunity with the Kraken and probably on the opening night roster. I've also got some pretty solid depth defensemen that they picked up in the expansion draft. Guys like Will Borgen from the Buffalo Sabres, who was looking like a pretty solid prospect. Dennis Chalowski wasn't going to get the ice time in Detroit, so it makes sense that he would find an opportunity here. And Jeremy Lauzon. And I think a lot of people like Lauzon. And actually his family reached out to me last season, so shout out to the Lauzon family. But I think this team has a lot of potential. And just, again, you've got depth. You don't have that number one defenseman like a Miro Heiskanen or a Dougie Hamilton or a Drew Doughty or one of those guys. They don't have that. But they have guys that just, if one guy goes out, they have another guy that could fill him right in, which could be a little bit dangerous, but we'll get to that. So now you look at their goaltending. And their goaltending got a huge upgrade in free agency after the expansion draft because Chris Driedger was supposed to be the guy. You had Driedger Vitek Vanacek as the backup likely, and Joey DeCourt as the third goalie. Well, things kind of changed on the first day of free agency. The Kraken not only got Schwartz, not only got Wenberg, they also picked up Philip Grubauer, a very good goaltender. I remember watching him in his time, I think in 2015, 2016 in Hershey, and I've loved him ever since, and he's gone on to have a great career, and now he will be sending his talents to the opposite side on the West Coast to Seattle. I think this is a great chance for him to show what he is as a goalie. There's been a lot of people that have said, he hasn't been the number one guy in Colorado. Joe Sakic and that staff there were never going to give him the full reins as the absolute starting goaltender. There was some hesitation for him as the guy. So now he's going to be the number one guy there. And he's going to have a really good backup in Chris Driedger. And I think Driedger is more reliable as that backup goalie, because you have to remember last season he was in a 3-goalie carousel with Bobrovsky, Spencer Knight, and himself in Florida. So you're going to just make him the starting goaltender in Seattle? That's a big ask. So a lot of people have given Grubauer a lot of heat for saying, hey, he's taken the bag, but he's not going to be on a team like the Avalanche this season. He's going to be on a much lesser skill-wise team. So I think this is an opportunity for him to show that he is a true starting goaltender. I don't think it helped with his injury situation in the playoffs for getting another contract there, but we'll see what he can do this year. I really like this tandem of Grubauer and Driedger, especially as an expansion team. And like I said, Ron Francis put goaltending and defense at a premium this summer, and we absolutely saw that with some of their moves. So, with that said, the Seattle Kraken, based off of what they did in the draft and what they've done in free agency and obviously the expansion draft, there are a lot of questions about why didn't they load up on the skill? Why didn't they bring in the Van Riemsdijks? Why didn't they bring in the Carey Prices? Why did they bring those guys in? I think in a year or two, we're going to see that. This is a team that they're doing it from the ground up. They aren't necessarily doing what George McPhee and the Vegas Golden Knights did, where they win right away. I think Seattle is looking at the long-term picture, especially with the flat salary cap and the exorbitant amount of money that was spent this summer in free agency. A lot of teams, it's going to backfire on them next summer and 2 summers from now. And that's when the Seattle Kraken are going to say, hey, you're kind of you're kind of choked up on the salary cap. We could come in and we'll take your bad contract, but you got to give us some draft picks. And that's where Seattle is going to step in. So they may not get it all on the front end in terms of teams protecting, players, in terms of giving draft picks to Seattle like we saw in Vegas, and teams are thinking, we're making the smart move, not giving Seattle draft picks and throwing out these bad contracts, but it's going to hurt them on the back end. And Seattle's going to say, all right, we're not going to take Carlson from you now, San Jose, but you're going to want us to you're going to give us a first and a second in 2 years from now just to get him off your hands when you wanted us to take him for free at the expansion draft. We're going to see the Seattle Kraken set the market, and I think that is pretty apparent. We've seen the Coyotes kind of do that as well this summer, taking bad contracts, and I think we're going to see that from Seattle over the next couple years. So let me know what you guys think. Oh, man, bad voice crack at the end. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL and more videos just like this one, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.